All right, we're going to be talking right now about independent living. We've talked about advocacy, empowerment. We've talked about quality of life. Now we're going to talk about independent living. The beginnings of the independent living movement started out in California, and it was attributed to a group of students at the University of California at Berkeley. A man named, or a student named Ed Roberts, who later became the director of the California Rehabilitation Agency, was among a group of students back in the 1960s, 1962, who started advocating for independent living services. And the foundation of independent living, similar to the foundation of quality of life issues and of empowerment issues, is that those who know best the needs of people with disability and how to meet those needs are people with disabilities themselves, and that the needs of persons with disabilities can be met most effectively by comprehensive programs that advocate for the rights and needs of people with disabilities and provide a variety of support services. And the goal is to integrate as fully as possible people with disabilities into the community. Now, the results of some of the initial efforts in the area of independent living was to authorize in the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 the creation of independent living centers. That was part of the Rehabilitation Act of 73. It wasn't just changing to people with severe disabilities, although certainly that was also an impact. It also had an impact on Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, which mandated that people with disabilities cannot be denied access into programs serving individuals whether they have a disability or not. And Section 504 relates to programs receiving federal or government monies cannot discriminate on the basis of disability. What is the philosophy of independent living? Well, the philosophy of independent living is a belief that each person is capable of being able to have the same civil rights and the same rights as individuals who do not have a disability. That individuals with disabilities are unique and entitled to full participation in society, and that people with disabilities should be able to live, work, eat, shop, play where they choose within a community. That in order for people with disabilities to live in a community, instead of a hospital or an institutional setting, the community has to be responsible to be accessible. It has the responsibility to be accessible. That people with disabilities can expect equal access to social, economic, and political opportunities, and again can be treated equally as with everyone else. That people with disabilities are not sick individuals. A person with a disability may become ill, but disability is not always an illness. And that people with disabilities should not be in an institutional environment unless they are sick and unless they are in need of acute medical care. And that people with disabilities have the same aspirations as people who do not have disabilities. And that people with disabilities do not wish to be described in the terms of such as being very brave or having this poster child image. And that people with disabilities are the ones who know best what the barriers are to their in self-sufficiency and independence, and they know what's needed in order to be able to live and function independently. So that is a brief description of what independent living is. Now, as an outgrowth, as I was saying before, to independent living programs is the concept of an independent living center. And this came out, again, of the 73 Rehabilitation Act. And an independent living center is a consumer-controlled, community-based, cross-disability, and non-residential, private, nonprofit agency that is designed and operated within a local community by individuals with disabilities, and that independent living services are such that they maximize a person's ability to live independently in an environment of their own choosing. And that an independent living center means that the consumer controls the center programs. Community-based means that it's designed for being in the local community, that it goes across all disabilities, and that it is not it is not a residence, it is not a group home, it is not an institution. Independent living services or primary services include things like peer counseling, independent living skills training, housing assistance, referral services for employment or referral services for housing, individual advocacy, advocacy with different public systems, and assistive technology. It can include other counseling services. It can include therapeutic services, assistance with transportation, vocational types of counseling, services for family members, assistance with communication. I think I lost the microphone. Let me get it back on again. It can include personal assistance with being able to address issues with the disability. It can address getting needed services. So those are some of the things that an independent living program provides. You will find that most large communities have independent living programs, and they are very beneficial and have become an integral part of the rehabilitation process. And consumers work with independent living centers, and we as professionals should also feel comfortable working with independent living programs. Let me move now into the notion of transition services. And transition services typically are referred to in the transition from school to work, or school to going into a post-secondary educational program. And that the definition of transition planning is that it is a coordinated set of activities focused on improving the academic and functional achievement of students with disabilities to promote the students' movement from school to post-school activities. And post-school activities can include college, vocational training, employment, continuing and adult education, adult services, independent living, and community participation. And good transition planning is outcome-oriented and focuses on results that help students reach their post-secondary educational or their post-educational goals, post-secondary goals. Okay. And transition planning typically occurs in the school setting through the use of the IEP, the Individual Educational Program. And the IEP team certainly can include the rehabilitation counselor, the rehabilitation professional. And I believe when we're invited to serve on IEP teams that the typical reason would be to facilitate transition planning. And I believe that normally we would get involved in this process when a student in school is age 16 and above. The types of services that we do would be to assess the student's needs. We look at interests, preferences. We look at helping people get experiences in the community. We develop options and potential plans for the individual. We can assist with vocational evaluations. We can assist with learning skills. We can provide various services that would be necessary for maintaining the person throughout a transition process, and these could include counseling, transportation, social work services, therapeutic services, and related types of services. And as rehabilitation professionals, we can work together with schools in terms of work-study programs, community-based programs, of community-based evaluation programs, job training programs, vocational counseling, career counseling, and looking at options for post-secondary education. So that, again, these are all things that we can provide in collaboration with the IEP team, other members of the IEP team, which can include the teachers, parents, psychologists, principals, nurses, social workers, and other people who are involved with the individual, physicians, etc. Okay. And we would work in collaboration with the school system. And during the past 20 or so years, the notion of transition planning has become a much more ingrained type of program, much more ingrained service. So that would be some of the basic notions behind transition types of services. And related to transition services is one outcome of a transition service, especially when looking at people going through a school-to-work program, would be the concept of supported employment. And so I'd like to end today by discussing the notion of what is supported employment. Basically, supported employment was developed, and as I said to you previously, supported employment came about because of the people in special education in the 1980s looking at rehabilitation services, and they said for their children graduating from school, everyone is entitled to go to public school, but not everyone is entitled to vocational rehabilitation services. And they began to look at what is next. And when they also looked at state rehabilitation services, they saw a program which they viewed as not really fully encompassing this notion, or a parallel notion, to all children can learn, all children can work. They saw rehabilitation as being oriented more towards those who could just benefit with rehabilitation, for the most part in terms of competitive employment, with some exceptions to that, but basically looking at competitive employment. And if you take the parallel notion of all students can learn and go to school, and the parallel notion is all people can work and hold employment. But it may not be the case that all people can hold public employment, or employment in a competitive job unsupported, or a competitive job at competitive wage rates as a job is normally found and performed. So the notion of supported employment flowed or grew out of this concept. And supported employment, as a result, starting back, I'd say in the early 1980s, and it was met by some degree of resistance by rehabilitation professionals, and there were some things back and forth on both sides that perhaps could have been done differently, both sides meaning special education professionals and advocates for people with disabilities and rehabilitation professionals. But in essence, supported employment is an ingrained part of what we do now in rehabilitation. It is an option available to consumers in coming through rehabilitation programs. Basically, supported employment is a program designed to assist people with the most significant disabilities become and remain employed in the competitive job market in an integrated workplace. Supported employment is often targeted at people with the most disabilities for whom competitive employment in traditional ways has not occurred. It has, for various reasons, because of the severity of disability, because of difficulty sustaining employment on an ongoing basis, the inability perhaps to perform a job without some sort of support. Supported employment provides assistance to individuals in terms of things such as job coaches, assistive technology, transportation, special job training, and job sculpturing and supervision. Supported employment programs provide jobs that are at minimum or above in wages, provide benefits. It may be, however, that people are sharing jobs so that a person may not get the full amount of the wage, but the way the job is structured, they may get part of that amount. And supported employment, again, is part of the rehabilitation landscape designed to help individuals become self-sufficient. And it encourages people to work within their communities, it encourages social interaction, it encourages integration, which again is some of the concepts flowing out of the public school concepts. It uses the natural workplace supports in conjunction with agency-provided supports that are available. Supported employment includes such things as job development and placement, intensive job site training, the enhancement of natural supports, any special skill training that might be needed, any special assessment or additional assessment. It includes working with employers, with parents, support system members, family members, advocacy groups, and it teaches compensatory workplace strategies so that the person can function, the person with a disability can function in the workplace. And it provides ongoing support services as needed. Obviously, the idea is to minimize the need for support services, but it's still available for the individual who needs support services. And support services are tailored to the specifics of the individual. A job coach often works with persons with disabilities, matches the person with jobs, provides initial support while the person is in the process of learning the job and adjusting to the workplace, and facilitates the transition to the natural supports that are available in the workplace. Now, I've been saying natural supports. Let's talk a little bit about what these are. Natural supports are such things as mentoring, providing feedback, supervision from employers, training, adjusting and adapting and working with co-workers, being able to socialize with co-workers, and being able to integrate into the job setting. And our goal, if we are a job coach, is to enhance these natural supports. Make sure that the consumer gets feedback, gets supervision. Make sure that the consumer is able to work with co-workers. Make sure that the person has the needed support in order to do the job. We also may do what's known as job sculpturing or job carving, job creation, which would say, let's take different components of different jobs and put them in different configurations to enable the person with a disability to be able to do the work. And as part of that, we also might be involved with such things as job development services. There are a number of different types of components to supported employment, and these include obviously paid employment, in which the person is paid wages for the work that is performed, and these would be at least jobs that are at a half-time basis, 18 to 20 hours a week. Integrated work sites, it's important that supported employment occur in the actual workplace as other individuals are working, and supported employment also entails ongoing support as needed, with hopefully the support being withdrawn to the extent that the support can be withdrawn, but still available as needed. So the basic components of supported employment are that, number one, it is actual paid employment. Number two, it occurs in integrated work settings, actual work settings, that it is not made up type of work, that people who are in a supported employment work alongside other employees who do not have disabilities, and that there's ongoing support for the individual in the workplace. There are some different employment models, Individual placement is basically where the person is placed in a job that is a regular ongoing job. The job coach assists the person to learn how to do the work and gradually spends less time at the workplace. Support obviously is still available as needed and can be called upon if there's an issue or if there's problem that arises. In this model, the consumer either may obtain employment independently and then work with supported employment to provide that assistance or support, or the rehabilitation agency may be the one to identify the job and to help the person into that job. But in any event, the job coach works with the person to learn the specifics of the work activity and learn how to do the work itself. And that would be the individual placement model. And that would be a basic job that exists in the community. It might be a job that's been carved out. It might be a job that's been modified. But basically, the person is doing the job in a workplace with other workers, and the support from the job coach is maybe great at the beginning, but pulls back to a level that is only needed for the person to be able to function in that job. A second model is what's known as the enclave model. In the enclave model, a group of individuals, perhaps 5 to 10 individuals, are trained and supervised, and they work in an enclave at a work site in a competitive employment business. Again, the people are trained, and the model is used, for example, in universities, in restaurants, hotels, cleaning services, for example. And individuals work in different jobs, and the enclave, the group, is dispersed throughout a business. And they might work in pairs, they might work individually, but basically there's a team approach to having the job performed. Okay. Another model for supported employment would be mobile work crews, where a small crew of individuals with disabilities, perhaps 5 or 6, work as a distinct unit in a self-contained business. And the crew may work at different locations, but they may do things like janitorial work or cleaning work activities. And they may work in a variety of settings: offices, buildings, residential, commercial buildings. Then there are some other models of supported employment, and these include a small business model where individuals with disabilities operate a business like any other business, and they work together. Again, the job coach helps to oversee the small business model. And another model would be an extension of this, a little different extension, but an entrepreneurial model where the consumer is supported by the job coach and by the rehabilitation agency. Now, there are some advantages to employers. There's no fee for the employer through a supported employment program. Applicants obviously are screened. Employees, consumers are matched to job requirements. The training of the individual is provided by the rehabilitation agency, and follow-up services are provided by the rehabilitation agency, and the rehabilitation program guarantees, in a sense, that the job will get done. So there are some distinct advantages to supported employment. Again, those models being the individual placement model, the enclave model, the work crew, a mobile work crew, and a small business, and then the entrepreneurial model. And within those, obviously, there are other variations, other distinctions that make supported employment programs unique to the different agencies, and they can be adapted and adopted to different types of businesses. So that briefly covers the concept of supported employment, and that covers us for week 6. And we've gone over advocacy, empowerment, assistance, and independent living, quality of life, transition, and supported employment. Your readings will contain more information about these topics, and questions that you have will be done through your course facilitators. Okay, we are done with week 6 now with regard to video.